Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge Reverend Garfield Williams for providing much of the historical information provided in this presentation. Without his lifelong dedication to gathering and preserving our past, Nicholson's early history would be lost forever. Copies of his book, Nicholson, the First Station on the Lackawanna Railroad, written in 1990, can be purchased through the Nicholson Heritage Association and are available here at the station. That said, on behalf of Nicholson's Sesquicentennial Committee, I'm thrilled to be here today to share a story in honor of Nicholson's 150th year as incorporated borough, and how a railroad helped shape a town, and how that town, in turn, built something remarkable. When Thorn Bottom, now Nicholson, was first carved from Pennsylvania wilderness in the late 1700s, it was a patchwork of land claims rather than a community. Claims stretched across acres, often hugging the three creeks that wound through the region. Travel was dictated by nature. Creeks were thoroughfares, and Native American footpaths, etched over millennia, served as the region's first roads. Over time, those trails were widened to admit wagons and stagecoaches, bearing names tied to destination rather than route numbers. Remarkably, many of those same paths remain beneath our wheels today. The first notable settlement emerged around 1800, where the Tunkhannock and Great Bend Turnpike, now our modern Route 92, intersected with the Abington and Waterford Turnpike, now Bacontown Road. There, Nathan Bacon built more than an inn to accommodate traffic from both roads. He sparked a town with a grist mill, which he built along with a general store. Numerous dwellings sprang up as well as a log schoolhouse, also used as a church. When the post office became established in the inn, Bacon renamed the hamlet from Thorn Bottom to Baconville and later to Bacontown. And so it remained until the iron horse roared to life. The steam locomotive, which you can see here, didn't just change transportation, it changed destinies. By the mid-1800s, the demand for northeastern Pennsylvania coal reached industrial cities far beyond the horizon. Scranton began surveying for railroad routes as early as 1835, eyeing New York, Buffalo, and Philadelphia. But it wasn't until 1847, when the Erie Railroad reached Great Bend in Susquehanna County, that those ambitions edged closer to reality. In 1849, the total amount of railroad track in the entire United States was only 2,812 miles. That same year, the Leggett's Gap Railroad was born. 60 miles of single track would soon connect Scranton to Great Bend, and Nicholson sat squarely in its path. With this, Nicholson witnessed the first surge of transformation. 1,200 men toiled 6 days a week on the railroad's construction. And what they built wasn't just track, it was a foundation for growth. Nicholson Station completed in 1850, was more than a depot. It was the largest on the route and second only to Scranton in its business and bustle. It stood as the town's commercial heart for as long as the Lackawanna line existed. Then came October 15, 1851. On that day, the engine Wyoming thundered into Nicholson, hauling 2 coaches and 3 flat cars filled with eager passengers on the railroad's maiden run. celebration was electric. Homemade flags were waved from porches and pastures. Locals climbed trees and hillsides for a glimpse of the train. Many had never seen a train before. George W. Scranton, railroad president, addressed the crowd, hailing the town's new place in the world. Daily train service had arrived. Nicholson's new chapter had begun. And indeed it did. By 1854, Nicholson's identity was shifting. The post office was moved from Bacon's Inn to the railroad station, and with that transfer came a symbolic name change. Bacontown gave way to Nicholson. With the railroad in place, mail could now ride the rails as well as the stagecoach, bringing the world a little closer to home. By 1891, there were 10 mail transfers daily, 5 in and 5 out. Dr. Samuel Estes, there he is, who once owned much of the land surrounding the station, played a pivotal role in shaping this new era. He sold part of his property to the railroad for its station and right-of-way, and simultaneously built a 3-story hotel near the tracks, the Estes House, later known as Nicholson House. It served guests for 76 years, offering lodging and 3 daily meals until around 1925. Then it was converted into apartments. Just across from the depot, Michael Sisk erected Nicholson's largest hotel in 1851, built on land purchased from Dr. Estes. It was considered first class until flames reduced it to memory after 24 years in operation. With railroad traffic surging, Bacontown was no longer the center of commerce. To regain some of the trade lost by the original Bacon Inn, Nathan Bacon financially backed his son-in-law, Cyrus Cooper, in constructing a new hotel at the corner of Main and State Streets in 1854. Known as the Cooper House, later the Niver, it too became integral to Nicholson's life. During the viaduct's 3 years of construction, its attic was rented to railroad workers. 35 cots lined the space wall to wall, each with about a foot of breathing room and a single hook above for belongings. The hotel ceased renting rooms in 1939, and after 85 years was eventually torn down just a few years ago. Among these great dames of Nicholson hospitality stood the Crowfoot House, built by Ulysses Crowfoot in 1860 just north of the depot. Though little is known of its finer details and no photograph has surfaced, we do know it offered good food 24 hours a day and 3 stories of service. It prospered for 18 years before succumbing to fire in March of 1878. But it was in 1911 that Nicholson gained its crown jewel, the Hotel Alma. Humphrey Tiffany crafted it by joining 2 older buildings into one elegant structure, complete with a showpiece lobby. He claimed with some pride that it was the finest hotel between Scranton and Binghamton. A limousine met each incoming train to retrieve guests, and what guests they were. During the construction of the cutoff and the viaduct, the Almont hosted some of the most remarkable figures of the day. Industrial titans, inventors, and leaders. Railroad President William Truesdale extended his hospitality to Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and former President Teddy Roosevelt. Governors from Pennsylvania and beyond dined there as they came to witness Nicholson's bridge to the future. Though much of the Alamo was lost to fire in 1950, part of it still remains, a quiet testament to the golden age of rail and the role our small town played in a far larger story. As Nicholson's depot flourished, so too did the town around it. The railroad didn't just bring passengers and freight, it delivered opportunity. Businesses sprang up to meet the demands of the growing population and the steady stream of travelers. Before official streets were mapped out or named, one path took the lead. What we know now as Pine Street was the first to be laid out with intention. It hugged the depot and quickly became the heart of early Nicholson commercial life. By 1855, so many shops had appeared along Pine that expansion naturally crept toward what would become Main Street. At first, Main Street wasn't even a street. New buildings were reached by walking narrow alleys from Pine. But it didn't take long for this stretch to claim its name and identity, and the term blocks began to describe clusters of businesses. Main Street evolved with the times. In 1875, buildings on the east side were moved back 8 feet to make room for a wider street and sidewalks. In 1962, 2 more feet of sidewalk on each side were absorbed into the roadway. On the west side, fire reshaped the landscape twice. First in 1873, then again in 1904. Each time, new buildings rose, set back further from the street than before. And with every fire and rebuild, prosperity returned. The early merchants of Nicholson were exceptional. They were respected, honest, resourceful. They drew customers from miles around. Their stores formed the backbone of the community. And on Saturdays in the 1930s, thousands, literally thousands, flocked here to shop and socialize. By the 1950s and 60s, Main Street lit up on Friday nights. It was payday, and the sidewalks bustled. People came not just to buy, but to visit, to catch up, to feel the heartbeat of a town alive with commerce and camaraderie. Stores stayed open until 9 o'clock, their windows glowing into the night. Nicholson had become more than a railroad town. It had become a destination. But it wasn't just shops and storefronts that blossomed in Nicholson. The railroad brought people, workers, families, and dreamers. And with them came the heartbeat of a growing town. The population of Nicholson Borough swelled from 586 in 1880 to 734 a decade later. Then again, to 893 by 1900. That's a 52 increase in just 20 years. And with more people came a need for gathering places beyond the depot and the dry goods store. Churches rose from this need for faith, for fellowship, and for community. The first was Catholic. In 1854, Patrick Dugan, an Irish immigrant, working on the railroad, opened his home to worshipers. A decade later, a formal church building was erected, the only Roman Catholic church between Scranton and Great Bend. It drew congregants from miles around. Though fire destroyed the original in 1890, it was rebuilt a year later on High Street, beside the rectory, where it still stands as a quiet anchor in Nicholson's spiritual life. In 1867, the Methodist Episcopal Church built where today's Assembly of God Church stands. Its architecture mirrored the first Catholic church, inside and out. As membership grew and space grew tight, a new church was built on State Street, the same location it occupies today. That building was dedicated in 1903 and continues to welcome generations of Methodists. Also in 1867, land was purchased for the Presbyterian Church and was constructed in its present spot. It was dedicated 2 years later. Ornate and proud, it was praised as the most beautiful church in Wyoming County. Its image would even be used in an 1869 county map, a symbol of Nicholson's growing status and pride. A fourth congregation came much later, born in faith and perseverance. In 1932, the Assembly of God began holding monthly services in the Palace Theater, now the site of the current fire hall. By 1959, they purchased a house on Oak Street, transforming the first floor into a worship space while the pastor's living quarters upstairs. It was then called Trinity Church. As the congregation expanded, they acquired a lot on State Street, and by 1971, opened the doors to a new sanctuary, formally dedicated on June 9, 1973. The name evolved from Trinity to the Bridge, and most recently to Thrive, under the leadership of the Peckville Assembly of God. 4 churches, 4 testaments to the people who came here, stayed here, and built lives rooted in faith and community. The railroad may have brought the masses, but it was places like these that built the bonds. As Nicholson's population grew, so did the need for education. The earliest schools were modest. Around 1850, a small school stood on West State Street near Harding Avenue. But by 1859, a more ambitious institution emerged, Stone's Academy. Built for advanced studies, it required tuition and reflected a growing hunger for learning in the community. In 1865, with Pennsylvania's move toward compulsory education, the Nicholson School Board leased Stone's Academy to house all grades. But its cellar classrooms were cold, damp, and poorly ventilated. The youngest children, tucked into these muddy, wet walls, often fell ill. So in 1870, the school board purchased a sash and blind factory on Oak Street and repurposed it into a new school. The same 3-tiered structure remained: elementary in the cellar, intermediate above, grammar on top. A school tax was introduced to support the institution. Yet, over time, the building became inadequate, crowded, run down, and unfit for the needs of a growing town. When debates swirled over whether to build a new school, largely due to concerns over increased taxes, a bold act changed the course of history. On a quiet May morning in 1895, Dr. Eno Wheeler, president of the school board, and a few like-minded citizens rose before dawn. Without permission, they began dismantling the school. By the time townspeople noticed, the roof was gone. Outrage followed. Some residents rode to Tunkhannock to seek legal intervention. By the time they returned with paperwork to halt the demolition, it was too late. The school was rubble, and the future was underway. That summer, a new school was built in the center of the same lot. It was a 2-story structure with 6 classrooms, a basement, central heat, and an office for the principal. The school offered 10 full grades, a proud leap forward. Then in the spring of 1918, tragedy struck. The building burned to the ground on April 5th. But the spirit of Nicholson would not be deterred. A new schoolhouse rose again on the same lot, in time for that fall's academic year. And in 1931, it was expanded to include 6 more classrooms and a full auditorium. In 1956, Nicholson joined 7 other boroughs and townships to form the Lackawanna Trail Junior-Senior High School. Our beloved school became the elementary building, serving generations of younger students until 1996, when the new elementary school opened in Factoryville. And with that, after nearly 200 years, Nicholson no longer had its own school. As the town grew, the railroad grew, with it expanding not just in distance, but in complexity, capability, and importance. Nicholson Station wasn't just a stop, it was a logistical marvel. A turntable, a water tower, and a roundhouse capable of housing 4 locomotives were added. Coal chutes fed the tenders, water tanks filled the boilers. Because Nicholson sat at the lowest point along the route, pusher engines were required, going both north and south, to help heavy freight trains climb the steep grades. These helper locomotives were stored in the roundhouse alongside a workhorse engine, affectionately known as the jerkwater. Together, they kept the system in motion and provided jobs for several dozen men in the borough. One of the railroad's greatest engineering feats came just outside of town, the tunnel through Roberts Hill, what we now call Tunnel Hill. It took 5 years to complete from both ends simultaneously, using only chisels, hammers, blasting powder, and a mountain of determination. 500 men labored to carve through 2,250 feet of solid rock, 14 feet high, 12 feet wide. When it opened in 1854, the tunnel trimmed at least 30 minutes off the travel time between Scranton and Great Bend, a major leap in speed and efficiency. Passenger service began humbly, just 1 train each way per day. Yet even that early, the numbers are astounding. In 1854 alone, Nicholson Station dispatched 2,562 passengers and welcomed 3,479 more. Across the stretch from Scranton to Great Bend, over 43,000 passengers traveled by rail that year. By 1883, a second track and a second tunnel were completed, expanding capacity even further. Then came the railroad's golden age. By 1900, the Lackawanna was running 28 passenger trains through Nicholson every single day. 12 stopped regularly. 4 more stopped on notice for passengers bound for New York or Buffalo. And the little jerkwater? It had grown into a regular fixture, now making 6 trips a day, 6 days a week. In 1902, the traffic became so intense that a signal tower was constructed just above the depot to manage the flow. That's how busy Nicholson had become. A town not just defined by the rails, but orchestrating them. The creeks that ran through Nicholson once powered its earliest industries. Before electricity, mills and factories drew on the flow of the Tunkhannock, Horton, and Martin Creeks to keep gears turning and saws running. But it was the railroad that gave these industries their wings. Suddenly, local products could reach distant markets faster, fresher, and in far greater quantity. This was a game changer for Nicholson's agricultural producers, especially the dairy farms. By the late 1860s, the town was shipping 2,000 pounds, that's 1 ton of butter each week to New York City. Every day, a dedicated milk train pulled into Nicholson to collect 4 full railroad cars of milk cans, bound for breakfast tables far beyond the county line. Industrial expansion followed. In 1900, the branch line was constructed about 2.5 miles outside of Nicholson to reach Carlucci's Quarry in Lathrop Township. That spur hauled bluestone from the hills to markets near and far, adding to the town's growing economic base. In 1923, the Parker Shearery Toy Company broke ground for a new factory right on the site of the former railroad yards. The DL&W laid track directly into the building itself, allowing freight cars to be pushed indoors for loading. Additional spur lines were constructed to serve other depots and shippers, tailoring rail access to the needs of local commerce. When this toy factory filed for bankruptcy, S.J. Bailey was able to purchase the holdings thanks to the generous monetary gifts and interest-free loans of the townspeople, who believed in the town and considered no sacrifice too great to ensure its best interests. Mr. Bailey moved his woodworking factory to this building, employing 200 persons in the process. The railroad wasn't just transporting goods, it was building livelihoods. Take Orrin Halstead, who ran a successful sawmill under contract with the Lackawanna. He supplied lumber for railroad ties, structural components, and even firewood, the vital fuel for steam locomotives. His operation thrived for years, powered by the very system he helped maintain. Stories like his were common. The tracks brought traffic, but they also brought transformation, turning creekside mills into regional suppliers and turning Nicholson into a town where ambition could ride the rails. As Nicholson thrived on rail, the town found itself on the cutting edge of technology and public utility, thanks once again to the railroad. In 1876, when Alexander Graham Bell introduced his telephone at the Philadelphia Centennial Exposition, one of its earliest advocates was Richard O'Brien, manager of the Western Union Company in Scranton. So impressed was he that he ordered several units and persuaded William Halstead, general manager of the Lackawanna Railroad, to test the device's potential. By May 19, 1878, telephone poles and wires reached from Scranton to the Nicholson Depot. That day, Mr. Halstead and a group of prominent businessmen gathered in Nicholson to test the line. The result? Immediate success. Nicholson had become the home of the first telephone service in all of northeastern Pennsylvania. The station phone soon became a lifeline, relaying instructions for pusher engines, flagging delays, and coordinating emergency responses in real time. The technology quickly expanded beyond rail operations. By 1887, a telephone line linked the Main Street drugstore with the Squire Stone Quarry in Lathrop, allowing workers to communicate about wagon loads and loading schedules. In 1892, another line connected the drugstore to the Lathrop Creamery for the same purpose. Soon, phones reached the hotels, stores, and private homes, webbing Nicholson in wires long before most towns even ever saw a switchboard. And communication wasn't the only necessity the railroad helped deliver. To meet the needs of its steam locomotives, Lackawanna Railroad built a dam on Horton's Creek, piping water by gravity to large tanks beside the station. Residents were permitted to tap into the supply for domestic use. Eventually, the railroad transferred water rights to the borough in exchange for their continued access. Thus, the Nicholson Water Company was formed. In 1892, New lines were laid across town, and for the first time, a reliable public water system served the growing community. 100 years later, the Horton Creek Reservoir was still supplying water to the borough. These staples of modern life, all sparked by the arrival of the railroad. With every new line, every new pipe, Nicholson became not just more connected, but more capable. So as the town basked in the prosperity and progress brought on by Steele rails, one could only ask, what more could possibly come from this extraordinary relationship? By 1910, whispers began to spread through Nicholson. A railroad was planning a grand relocation. Land was being purchased, survey crews were testing the rock beneath the Tunkhannock Creek. The talk, a bridge, a mammoth bridge was coming. Not everyone believed it. Oh, they won't do it, it costs too much. Or who'd climb that hill to ride a train? And the most unforgettable, trains can't run that high up in the air. But in the spring of 1912, the doubts began to crumble. Equipment rolled into town. Side tracks extended to the construction site. Cement bins appeared. Lumber was offloaded. Drills sank into the earth. The realization set in. The impossible was happening. To put its scale in perspective, if all of the cement required had been delivered at one time, it would have filled 1,093 railroad cars and stretched into a train 14 miles long. And with the project came people, lots and lots of people. Over the next 3 years, Nicholson's population swelled to 3,500. Temporary housing cropped up everywhere. Hotels were full to bursting, and the town pulsed with the energy of progress. Economically, it was a boom of historic proportions. But why take such an audacious undertaking? The answer? William Haynes Truesdale, president of the DL&W Railroad from 1899 to 1925. Truesdale wasn't just a businessman. He was a revolutionary, visionary. In his pursuit of the most efficient and economical lines possible, he launched one of the most ambitious modernization products in American rail history. In a 1915 interview with the New York Times, Truesdale defended the much criticized $12 million cost to shorten the route by just 3.6 miles. His response? It means efficiency, and that alone. What may sometimes seem like extravagance of construction very well may be, in the truest sense, economy of operation. This wasn't about reaching new destinations. It was about making existing routes better. The new Clark Summit Halstead cutoff eliminated steep grades, eased curves, reduced wear on rails, and shaved precious time from freight and passenger schedules. Most notably, trains that once required 5 engines could now run with just 2, a feat of engineering and economics. Truesdale summed it up with timeless clarity. The object of transportation today is to furnish the best sort of transportation. And indeed, they built not just with ambition, but with artistry. Construction forms were designed to be reused across phases of the project without compromising structure or beauty. No corners were cut. The pride in their craftsmanship ran deep. The method of holding forms in place was so accurate that none of the pier shafts were even a quarter of an inch out of plumb. That kind of precision doesn't just happen by accident or luck. It happens through vision, grit, and teamwork. William Truesdale never sought fame by building the world's largest reinforced concrete bridge, or the second largest, Martins Creek Viaduct, just 8 miles north in Kingsley. The sheer scale of these viaducts was dictated not by vanity, but by vision, to carve the straightest line between 2 points. The landscape left no other option. And so, the Nicholson Bridge rose, and along with it, another tunnel about 1 mile south of the viaduct was required of this new line for the cutoff. This double-track tunnel is 3,630 feet long and 30 feet wide. It is entirely brick-lined and has 235-foot air shafts to ventilate the locomotive exhaust. At the dedication ceremony of the cutoff on November 6, 1915, Pennsylvania Governor Martin Brumbaugh declared that the viaduct had been well named the 8th wonder of the world. Specifically addressing the people of Nicholson, he added, "As a matter of fact, the old wonders of the old world do not begin to compare in the quality of genius with this splendid piece of engineering skill that spans your valley and crowns your town." Think about it. With all of the places on the planet Earth, the largest reinforced concrete railroad bridge in the world has ever known was built right here in Nicholson. Between everything else and now this, could there possibly be anything more to be attained from this phenomenal relationship with the railroad? Yes, indeed. With the opening of the new line, the old line was abandoned. But Nicholson once again turned opportunity into legacy. Local resident Ned Tiffany, prompted by Jesse Tiffany's editorials in the Nicholson Examiner, lobbied the highway department in Harrisburg to repurpose the former railroad bed as a highway. Thanks to his tireless persistence, the DL&W sold the right-of-way to the Commonwealth for $1, despite an appraised value of $1 million. Mr. Tiffany was successful in getting the legislature to approve the building of the highway, and from that path, the Lackawanna Trail was born. The new concrete and macadam highway, costing $2 million, was opened to the public on June 28, 1922, in grand ceremony, stretching 60 miles from Scranton to Binghamton. The ceremony included New York Governor Nathan Miller and Pennsylvania Governor William Sprout meeting under the arch on the line between the two states to shake hands as the road opened. An enthusiastic crowd of about 5,000 people cheered as a parade of more than 1,000 automobiles went through the archway toward Binghamton. What a day for the people of the two communities and for all the smaller towns in between, as the new Lackawanna Trail opened for use. Eventually, it became known as Route 11 in 1926 and reached from Key West, Florida to Ottawa, Canada, as part of the initial U.S. highway system. For a time, it was celebrated as America's most magnificent highway, a wonderland of scenic beauty. And on summer Sundays in the 1930s and 40s, as many as 1,000 cars per hour passed through Nicholson, yet another era of prosperity, courtesy of the railroad's legacy. Looking back to that October day in 1851, when George Grant spoke of the honor and new life the railroad would bring to Nicholson, I wonder if even he could have imagined how much change would follow. The people, the progress, the pride, all stemming from steel rails and a pioneering spirit. Norfolk Southern, the present owner of this line since 2015, has suspended all passenger service, including historic steam-town excursions. Freight trains still pass over the colossal Nicholson Bridge. They don't stop. a stark reminder of what once was and the greatness of a railroad that became Nicholson's legacy. Thank you for coming, and a special thank you to the Nicholson Heritage Association for allowing us to share this story in this 175-year-old building that represents the very beginning of the transformation that would affect Nicholson forever. It's been an honor to celebrate a part of Nicholson's 150th birthday with you here today, and to carry our story forward, one rail, one bridge, and one gathering at a time. Thanks. No questions? Yes.
All right. I'm not even from here. The railroad evidently was right here, I guess, where
Yes.
the road is.
Yes.
And when they built it up there, was there a train station up there?
Yes.
And is it there now?
No.
No. Okay, so that came, okay.
As a matter of fact, that station closed in, dates mixed up here. That one, in 1971,
Okay.
that one closed. Anything else? Thank you.